Final Word Cricket Podcast, Adam Collins with Geoff Lemon in London at the Royal Garden Hotel, the scene of many a night out after a World Cup, that kind of thing across the journey.
Probably the only time we'll ever be let in here.
Yeah, right. I don't think we're ever going to have the money to stay here. This bloke does, though, opposite us. England opener in the one-day series as we're talking, but the test team more notably of late. Ben Duckett, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Great to have you with us. I mean, setting it up, this will probably go out at some stage in October, but you've been playing in the one-day international series over the last week or so. Just give us a sense of what it's like being part of a team that's kind of in transition from a white ball perspective. Brendan McCullum coming on to coach you guys soon. Champions Trophy on the horizon as well, but a lot of new guys coming through. I mean, you're a bit of an old head in that team suddenly.
Yeah, I am. We did warm-ups, actually, and I was in the old group, but I think it's exciting. You know, we've got a kind of young group, as you say, coming through, and you know, I think when you're always playing for England against Australia, people are demanding that you win. You know, that's the most important thing, and I think the kind of overlap we got at the minute of the test group, you know, with Trez coaching, Brookie captaining, is that same kind of mantra of the test stuff, which I saw after 2-0 down. People got a little bit frustrated with a couple of Brookie's comments, but I think you know, we probably weren't expecting to rock up and beat one of the best one-day sides in the world 5-0. You know, but if we can go in the right direction, we're in a position where we could win 3-2.
Yep.
You know, we want to win, but you've also got to remember who you're playing against. You know, a group of young lads who are just starting out in 50-over cricket for England. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at the minute. You know, there's kind of a very short journey to the Champions Trophy where we want to be peaking at the right time. And I think as long as we're doing that, you know, but you even see the other night, you know, knocking that off easily. You know, I know with a bit of rain at the end, and the way Brookie played, the way Jaxie played. You know, Salty hasn't fired. There's plenty of people in that side who are world class. So it looks good, I think.
It's kind of interesting with your career that even though you made a name for yourself as an aggressive player, you've always batted at a high tempo all the way back through to, I guess, junior cricket and so on. But it's kind of taken you a little while to penetrate the England white ball teams. You've been far more a red ball player when called upon most of the time. Yeah,
it has, and you know, it's probably been a little bit strange at times. I thought maybe 4 or 5 years ago my chance would be in white ball cricket, and you know, I've found a way to get into that side in the test stuff, and you know, I've loved every second of it. It's the pinnacle of cricket, you know. But now I've got an opportunity where I could potentially play all 3 formats, you know, and it feels like the time's right for me. It probably wouldn't have been 4 or 5 years ago, but I feel like my game's in a good place now. And, you know, actually the way that I do open in Test cricket, I don't really have to go and change. I made a joke actually saying I might rein it in a bit in the 50 over stuff. But, you know, it's kind of back the same way. And you actually, I realised at Trent Bridge in that first game when I was on maybe 80 and you've got 25 overs left and the amount of time you have in a 50 over game. And I think that's just the biggest learning that we're trying at the minute is we don't play much 50 over cricket. You know, learning when to go or when to put pressure on them, soak them up. You even saw the other day, you know, when we were kind of all over the Aussies and so much time left and Carey played an unbelievable knock and you realise that there's, you know, so it's getting used to that side of it. But yeah, I'm just really wanting to take my opportunity in the white ball stuff now and stay in all 3 formats.
It's been interesting watching you in 50 over cricket specifically because it feels more natural for you in a way. Like it feels like your perfect format. Like you're not a huge 6 hitter, but you're a huge 4 hitter. You've got gaps. You've got the new ball. You're coming out and opening. I guess there's slightly more defensive fields than in Test cricket in some ways because you've got more opportunities to hit boundaries in Test cricket. But it seems odd that you haven't played that much 50 over cricket. It feels like that this is exactly where Ben Duckett should be.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've always thought that 50 over. I had a really short taste of it in county cricket and did well. You know, and then unfortunately for me, when I was 22, 23, I was probably a part of the best era of white ball cricket for England. And to be honest, it didn't really matter how many runs you were scoring. You weren't breaking into that team. It was, you know, I was 12th man and I was a few times, but just couldn't get a game. You know, and I think that maybe even if I'd have got a chance a couple of years ago, you know, I might not be here now. So like now with Baz coming into the frame, you know, it's great for someone like me because he knows what I can do and he knows he gets the best out of me. So, yeah, hopefully for the next few years that looks pretty good.
So what we tend to do on these interviews, Ben, is we go back to the start of your cricket journey. So let's just get a feel for what your cricketing childhood like was for you? Like, was cricket always front and centre of your existence? Were you, the kind of kid that had a bat in his hand at age 3, and how that progressed through your youth and your school years?
Yeah, probably exactly right. From as early as I can remember, and yeah, my dad's really keen on cricket. Mum was very sporty. To be honest, I just loved every sport as a kid, and probably until I was 15, 16, when I kind of had to, really prioritise cricket. It was tennis, rugby, all those sports. I wish I'd have played golf at a younger age now, because that's the only other sport I play now. But yeah, it was, I was very lucky to go to some great schools. I went to Millfield Prep and then Stowe School when I was a bit older, and played most of my cricket there. I didn't really play much club cricket. And then fairly early on playing second team cricket for Northants.
Interesting you mentioned those two schools, because there is a through line with a lot of guys that make it now, having gone to schools like the ones you just referred to there. Were you going to those schools because of your cricket, or were you playing cricket coincidentally because you were going to those schools? Like, what was the progression like to you, like attending schools which almost, set you up to have a pro career?
I mean, without sounding, it's probably just my parents, and we were very lucky, I think. Okay. I grew up in Somerset and Millfield Prep. I think my parents were friends with the headmaster or something, and nice. There was a little link in there. And okay. I think from there, you want to stay in those systems, and that was just the way it fell for me. And you're so lucky to, have incredible facilities on your doorstep every single day, and that's the difference between maybe going to some other schools where you might play club cricket on a Saturday and go down some average nets or something. I was very blessed and very fortunate, and I guess I can thank my parents for lobbing me in those schools. But you get scholarships to these places, but I was there from 13, 14, right. So I mean, it wasn't the grades, but it must have been because I had a bit of a sporting package.
But you're in that channel pretty early, like you're in the 19s World Cup squad. Like you must have known pretty early on that you had what it took to at least have a crack at the higher level. Yeah,
I don't know when I was probably till I was about 16, 17, and you're dominating school cricket, and then it's probably when you play 19s and you think that you're a bit of a big dog, and I feel like every 19s, but you're playing in a World Cup, you're wearing the England shirt, and then it was going from that to county cricket. I was like, wow, like this step up is so much bigger.
Right, and I think you realise you're not as good as you think you are.
Big time. Yeah. And you're playing against these 35 year old county cricketers who are very good and can work you over. And even it's the difference between playing 19-year-old boys and playing against men. Quite intimidating. So I remember that probably took me a full 12 months to kind of get my head around that, thinking, wow, I need to get better at it.
Right. Is it kind of the physicality that makes a difference, or is it the fact that they have so much knowledge? Like a 19-year-old, I imagine, is more likely to just pelt you but not necessarily have a plan, whereas a bowler at that higher level, I would guess, has they're much more theory that they can fall back on. They can go, I'm going to try this, then this, then this, and figure out a way that they can get your weakness.
Yeah, certainly. And that's what I'm playing now, and I'd be thinking about the game much differently now than when I'm 18, 19. I think, even you don't really come across too much or anyone bowling 90 mile an hour at that, and you come into the men's game and suddenly I feel like I always remember 70 mile an hour felt quick, then 80 mile an hour is a certain age, and then now you're facing 90 odd mile an hour, but you've just got to deal with it.
You came onto our radar in the year when you had your breakout season with Northants. We were commentating on the Northants versus the Australians tour game at Wantage Road.
And pretty niche, like not a lot of people call back to that, but this is, for us, we're like, it was such an entertaining game.
Well, it was for us professionally getting to do that game together, I think that's probably the first time you and I commentated on real radio as opposed to sitting on your sofa doing it illegally. And it was the crookie game from heaven, right? The extraordinary 69 ball century. Yeah. We went out with Crookie that night. It was a terrific weekend, full stop. But, we'd heard about you. We'd heard about this young bloke who was smashing it. You made several hundreds in the season. You go on to, I think, score somewhere in the order of 1,300, 1,400 runs at high average, lots of centuries. You're on a roll. And you'd come up against that 90 mile an hour bowling that day. And that's Pat Cummins' first game on tour, for instance. And it's not, and Pete Siddle plays, doesn't he? And Mitchell Marsh and others who are at the front line of the Aussie team. What was it like having a chance to play against a proper kind of test attack as a youngster in a season when you were taking the next step?
Yeah, I remember that really well, and it's actually pretty cool because it's irrelevant really how you do in that game. You're playing for the Aussies basically. It's their warm-up game, and it's you know, I could nick off a 0 against Pat Cummins and no one even talks about it, or you can go and, you know, I've got 50 that game, and then I remember got out to a Mitch Marshall-Lushner, I think, after getting through Cummins. But I do remember that. I remember I was batting with David Murphy actually, and I think I faced one ball from Pat Cummins' spell of 5 overs, and I literally straight to cover, ran a single, and then Murph got peppered for the next 4 overs, and I was facing Gazza at the other end. But I remember watching that going, you know, geez. But even doing that, you know, you're like, it's very different doing that there at Wantage Road, Edgbaston, 25,000, you know. But when you actually, because at that time you're thinking about playing in front of those big crowds, which can have an effect on you. If you take all that out and you just face who's coming in at you, it is a different game. But you add all that extra pressure on, whereas that game I had no pressure. You know, I could run at Lion and try and smack him over his head, and if I got caught mid-off, there was no consequence whatsoever. But yeah, it was a good week, and I do remember that for cricket. It was an incredible week, and we ended up dominating the game for the whole thing, really.
Well, it could have beaten them by an innings at one point. So Josh Cobb was captaining that game.
He dropped one at first slip, didn't he?
He did. He put one down, and then he's coaching with the Australians at the moment on this tour. So I chewed his ear off for about 2 hours about this game up in Durham, which he remembered well. But yeah, you make 400 just about, and then have them 8 for bugger all, and it's Cummins and Lyon who get the runs. But we were sitting there thinking, well, if you get them out here, you've got 60 overs left. They're cooked. Like, they've just been annihilated at Trent Bridge. Michael Clark's not there. None of the Australians want to be playing this game. We're like, Australia lose to Northants by an innings in 2 days because the first day was a washout.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it could have been one of the great tour upsets. You were a cigarette paper away.
I know. But I do remember that thinking, because I didn't want them to get past the follow-on and have to face Cummins again with a new one. So I was, please, then Cobby, drop that one.
So, I mean, 15 I mentioned before, you know, that's the year when you've taken that next big step. As a pro at Northants, that's the club that you've played at from when you're a youngster. Then 2016 is an extraordinary season for you. I remember I was over here when you made your 282 not out against Sussex to start the season. But you get this reputation of being the big hundreds guy, 185, 189, 205 to end the season, heaps of runs and all the rest of it. You win the Blast final with that bunch of hefty lads that played for Northants in 2016, if I recall correctly. You get 80-odd in the semi-final. You mean your PCA Player of the Year and the PCA Youth Player of the Year. You combine that unusual, the 2 awards in that most of the time the Player of the Year is an older bloke, but you're a young fella. That must have been an extraordinary thing to have, at 21 or 22, be making bulk runs week in, week out and being on the cusp of the England national team. Yeah,
it was an incredible year. And I think, you know, you see a lot of young players kind of have breakthrough years like that, and you know, I think I look back to it and, you know, people haven't seen much of you, so the game is slightly easier then when they don't know every weakness and, you know, all that. But I think the biggest thing looking back to that is I wasn't prepared for what was to come after. You know, I was just a young lad who had a very good year, but then you then get thrown into India away and things like that, and then you go, you know, you've always got to keep kind of getting better. And I remember, like, even I've just gone back to India now, and you know, it's just so hard to play. I still think I'm a good player of spin, but I remember coming back from that first trip and everyone saying, yeah, he needs to work on facing spin, and I was thinking, if I need to work on spin, then I'm in trouble, because I feel like that's the strength in my game. You know, it's just a bit different about facing them out there. But yeah, that year was just incredible. I had so many great memories of, you know, winning a trophy with Northants, you know. The runs I got, and yeah, I think it was actually probably what was to come after that was the tougher thing.
It also gets you on the England radar with the Lions. I remember that Lions team in 16 where you were just scoring 400 seemingly every game, like Vince Milan yourself. I've been glad to look today. 163 not out from 104 balls in the first game. That's what you started with. And then 220 not out from 131 deliveries. I mean, the definition of banging the door down, right? Like you get picked for the Lions and make these huge scores there. Again, that must give you, at the time at least, the sense that you're ready for the next step.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does, you know. And I'm always one of those where I maybe surprise myself. And I remember I said to Thorpe, actually, after that 160, I said, well, I'm never going to get past that. And then obviously a few days later, I did against Sri Lanka. But, that was, I know we speak about 50 over cricket where the extra man up, and facing loads of spin with being able to reverse sweep. And, I was actually hitting the ball a lot straighter then, which I'm trying to do more now. But that was where it was really good fun. And like now I talk about opening the batting. If I'm batting in the middle and I'm on 100 not out and 2 spinners are bowling and they've got the extra man up, can really try. And that week was a perfect example of it with Pakistan and Sri Lanka A. But it just felt like one of those things where I just, I don't know. I even look back and I find it really hard to explain like the big scores I was getting. And, I have carried that right through my career, probably until recently in Test cricket, where, I pride myself on going massive because, even then my technique was worse then. I was getting a lot lower scores than probably the consistency I'm getting now. But I always said to myself, if I get in, I want to go massive because, that same year, or, those 4 numbers you read out, the hundreds I got, you've got to remember all the scores in between that. That adds up to quite a high number. Yeah. Those 4 innings out of a whole season.
Yeah, it looks nice when you pluck out the big ones.
Yeah, so like, whatever that adds up to, nearing on 800 or maybe 800 plus, at times in that summer, I was like, I can't open the batting, which sounds ridiculous when you've got scores like that. But I remember like the 4 or 5 low scores in between. I was like,
in a way, you felt more doubt.
Yeah.
Because you got that big score, but then you were like, I don't know how to back that up. And
yeah, well, it's just more like, because opening the batting, you get good balls, you get, it is tough, whereas I think back to now, if I have 2 tests where I don't score runs, I kind of say to myself, you're gonna get a score. Like, over the time of your whole career, you haven't really gone 6 months without not scoring, like it's going to come. But when you're 21, you don't think like that. If I get 280 and then you go 0, 2, 4, 6, you're thinking, I'm not going to get another run for the rest of the year. Just being a young 21-year-old, whereas I think that's the biggest thing with batting now and the age I am of, not in an arrogant way, but just the way the game works. Like, you are going to get a score, so just keep doing what you do.
It's the bigger sample size, right? Like that idea that the older you get, each year is a smaller percentage of your total lifespan, so the years feel faster. So in a way, the more you've batted, the more innings you've had, you're able, you know that those periods come and those periods go.
Yeah, exactly. And it's how you get through them. And at the minute, it's probably just... Actually, this summer's probably been one of my more frustrating of my career because I felt in very good form from start to finish. I got a double 100 for knots, and that's my only 100, and I probably should have had 3 test hundreds and an ODI 100 in the first, which is good problems to have. I feel good, and I'm hoping that, once I get over the line, I'm going to go and get 2, 3, 400s. But, they're crucial moments where, you could have had 3 test hundreds and an ODI 100 in the same summer, and you're talking on the lines of what Ruji's done.
Yeah.
And that's probably what separates him and other players. And it's probably the way that we play and the way that I play, but I think it's certainly been a learning point for me that when I do get to those, think back to that 21-year-old and go massive and really hurt teams.
So with that kind of situation, it's interesting because there are always cliches around it. Someone gets a few scores like that and you'll always hear, ruthless, they've got to be more ruthless and stuff like that. Do you think do those sort of comments actually reflects reality, or is it more like is it you can just be unlucky and get out in the 90s or the high 80s or whatever it is, and that's just how it is? Or I don't know. Is there truth to the cliches, or do the cliches just happen because people are used to saying them?
Well, I think you have to look at how that individual's getting out in those situations. And if I look at the test stuff, for example, the only one I really look back on was that one at the Oval, 86, but on a green seamer, swinging around under lights, I'd have taken 86 at the start of the day. And then the shot I get out to is the reason why I went from 55 to 86 in the space of 2 overs, playing a scoop shot. So, like, even when I walked in, Baz is the first person to come up to me and go, I don't mind that. Like, you're putting them under pressure, like, doing it in your way kind of thing. That was another learning point of, playing that shot just it could be one too many, but that was the bowler I was going to do it to originally. And I'm actually glad I've played that shot now, because I've shown that you can do it in Test cricket. It's probably just the same as Ruti's reverse scoop. You know, when he was doing it in the Ashes, he was an absolute hero. If you get outplay on that shot, you're going to get some
reckless, arrogant,
of course,
blah blah.
But like, you know where the ball is going to pitch every single ball in Test cricket, which in one day cricket is harder, because they might bowl a slower ball, whereas there's going to be pace on top of the stumps majority of the time. But anyway, and then West Indies, like the 270s I got, the first innings was playing nicely and then nicked off to a decent ball. Because obviously if you're scoring quickly, the ball's still new, the bowlers are still quite fresh. That's the only issue with scoring quicker. And then second innings, they changed the ball and got one that hit me on the toe. You know, and then I go to the first ODI and I'm batting and I'm like, I'm getting 100 here. Like, it's just guaranteed. Marnus is on, I'm on 95. And then you bat like that to try and get yourself to 100 and maybe change the way you're playing.
Get a bit more cautious.
And then you get out. So, like, there's so many different ways to look about it. But, you know, it's not like I was throwing it away every single time. You know, every single time I went out to bat there, I was like, I want to get 100. I'm desperate to get 100. And it's not, I want to throw it away. I'm happy with 85, because I'm certainly not. Like, I don't judge myself on 85s. No one's going to look back and even at a 95, I've got 98 and 95 against Australia and could have had 200s in two different formats. You know, that's what I want to do. So when people say stuff like that, no one's as frustrated as I am. But you kind of have to crack on and get on with it and move on.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm endlessly fascinated about the psychology of the teams that you play in now, about the positive reinforcement upon getting out to the scoop and so on, and how that would radically differ, I suppose, to the environment when you first come in. I know it's a small, as Geoff said, the sample sizing, right? You play 4 test matches, they're all in Asia, it doesn't work out, you're dropped, it happens. That's kind of the game. You do bounce back pretty well in 2017, it's worth noting here. It's not as though you have that time in the wilderness immediately, as a lot of players.
I can't remember the numbers, but I might have averaged 35, or I can't remember.
Yeah, it's 1,000-run season, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have that.
And I haven't had many of them since, like getting 1,000 runs. And I remember that summer I was going, God, I've had a terrible year. And I'd take that every single year. Yeah. Like, opening batting, 35,000 runs. And it felt like I'd just been so bad. And it felt like that as well, even from maybe like, oh, you're nowhere near England now. And I was thinking, wow, like you have to be averaging 50, 60 plus. Like,
yeah, but not many are in county.
Yeah, and that's an age thing. Like, as I say, if you offer me a full year of county cricket next year and I open the batting and score 1,000 runs and average 35, it's a good year. But it felt like a disappointment at the time.
But I guess the people that mattered understood where you were at, though, don't they? Because you do go to Australia in 17, 18. I know it's an extended squad and there's lines components to it and all the rest of it. This is one of those bits in your career which is memorable. People know about it. It was a big story at the time when you poured a pint over Jimmy's head. But it feels like in hindsight, the response to that was way over the top. You know, you were suspended, you missed Lions games, you got punted from the Lions in the next summer, which felt like it was partly due to what happened in Australia. To me now, like if you poured a pint over Jimmy's head in the pub, Baz would probably tell you to get another one and do it again, right? Like, you know, just this idea of the way that the dressing room felt as a young boy, a young guy coming through, compared to the difference in it now as a senior player, but also just the types of personalities you've got around you and how you probably suffered from that early on with respect to that one episode in Perth.
Yeah, you know, this was a moment in my career where, you know, also because of being and wanting to play for England again, I couldn't speak about it, you know, for years after. So you're kind of bottling this all up inside, and you're like, if I, you know, because even what you've said there is incorrect, you know, but everyone thinks that that's...
So give it, well, that's how we remember it all, what actually happened.
And I'm trying to think in my head now, because I've never said it, but now Jimmy's retired, different people involved in the ECB, I can kind of probably say what actually happened. And then people can make their judgment from there. But, like, we were messing around, and me and Jimmy got on really well from the England tour we'd had previously. And it was literally just messing around kind of stuff. And Jimmy actually threw a drink on me, but no one knows about that. And then said, "Oh, we're just messing around. You can just lob one on my head. That's fine." Genuinely. So then I just poured one on his head, and the security guard saw me from the ECB who looks after us, and it filtered back, and that was kind of basically the story. We carried on the rest of the night together. like getting on well. So like that's the story that's got blown up. And that's it. And you know, then obviously when things start getting out in the media and everyone's saying all this stuff, then everyone believes that.
Like Johnny, the headbutt that wasn't a headbutt.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as a story or a headline's out there, well, that's what happened then. But then you can't really come out and say what I've just said, because I'm a young lad trying to break into the England team. It's one of the best ever England players, you know, and people didn't really want to hear me because, you know, it was actually a really, really tough time. You know, people look back and it's probably funny and stuff like that, but when you're in Australia and you're kind of being told you can't go to training, you can't play, it's a lonely place for a 22-year-old.
It just feels like they fucked that up royally. I mean, again, young player and all the rest of it. They surely had some understanding of the context and the wider pressure of being in Australia and the other stuff that had happened coincidentally at the Avenue nightclub in Perth and so on.
That's the bit, isn't it?
It just feels like you were like...
There was a lot going on that night. You know, it was the England lads' first night out that they were allowed, and you know, I couldn't believe that I was the one making the headline the next day. That's what I'll say.
You must have felt so lonely, and you know, with respect to the fact that your cricket career, you know, the boy's dream come true type thing as a guy coming through. You get to go to Australia. I suppose you weren't in the squad, but there's always a chance you could end up playing a test match in those circumstances, and you've been in the test team only a year before, and suddenly you're like persona non grata when it comes to England cricket. It's a pretty bloody abrupt thing to happen.
Yeah, and being in Australia, so you're not getting much sympathy from anyone out there, are you? But yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, it feels like your world's ending, and you know, as I say, the time difference, you're not speaking to family much, and you know, the lads around me in that group at the time were amazing, you know, but but it was actually, you know, not that moment that was the issue. It was, you know, for the next kind of 12 months, you know, it was, you're basically on hold now for a little while, which for a 23 kind of, you know, what I've already played for England, that's kind of a bad time to, you know, basically get told you've got no chance at it.
100%.
You know, and whether that, you know, it does make you grow up a little bit faster and stuff, and you know, dealing with what I had to deal with probably made me a little bit more resilient as a person, and probably a bit tougher. You know, but all these things now, in a really weird way, I wouldn't change much of it, because, you know, where I am right now, when I play for England, it's like I don't want to give that shirt to anyone else. You know, I'm like, and I know at times when I'm batting that might say otherwise, but like, even like the one day stuff now, and like the age I am and the journey I've been on, you know, I've probably not made things easy at times. I'm not a saint and an angel, and you know, I probably was an easy target at the time. You know, that would be the only thing I'll say. You know, whether it was dealt right or wrong, you know, that's for people to make their own mind up. But like, it's made me now go, right, well, I'm 30 in a few weeks. You know, I want to maximise this England career for as long as possible, because it hasn't just been you're in at 21 and you play 10 years. Mine might be a little stint there and then 6 years now or whatever. So,
but you're in and comfortable where you are. Like, it worked out, but it might not have worked out. It feels to me like you end up being collateral damage in the fact that England at a management level has a difficult relationship with touring Australia. And it seemed like they were so highly strung about it. And, you know, obviously a series where they end up getting tailed up pretty early and all the rest of it. There's so much sort of anxiety at management level that we have to get everything right and we can't be criticised and we can't do anything that makes a story. And then you just happen to be the one who, you know, puts your foot in the rabbit's snare and ends up hanging upside down from a tree without having intended it. It's such an innocuous thing to have such a big blowback.
I think that's the biggest thing. You know, you're out in a bar and you're doing what you're doing, but at the time it was like, I don't know how this is so big, because, you know, I know exactly what happened that night. I know exactly what was going on, and then I'm seeing myself on the news and I'm going, I haven't done anything to require that.
Juvenile delinquent.
Yeah, but now I obviously know the England-Australia battle and stuff. I know why, because it was such a big thing. But then I'm thinking, I'm not even in the squad. Like, I don't think half of Australia know, or more than they know, have any idea who I am.
Is it overhyped, like the Australia-England thing? Does it become too big to the point that it's destructive? But sometimes it feels that way with things like this.
Potentially, I mean, that series last summer, like, that was when I was like, I remember day one, I don't really get nervous, and I was like, well, what's going on there? Like, this is so different. And then even playing 6 tests this summer, it just doesn't come close playing in an Ashes series. So, but I think that comes from the fans. You know, they're not as interested when it's not England with Australia. But, you know, I was getting the messages from mates last summer saying I'm sat at my desk and who don't watch cricket, you know, watching the Ashes all day and going, this is incredible. You know, and to be a part of that and to play in such an amazing series, yeah, it's something I'll look back on definitely when I'm a lot older.
And there's such a difference, you know, in other sports, the gap between the very top level and the amount of interest in it and the next level down isn't huge, right? Think about it, like a crude example, but the Premier League to the Championship, right? Still tens of thousands of people go League One and so on and so forth. Bit different with you. I mean, you're in Australia in 17-18 and you're back to Wantage Road in 2018 and there's probably like 400 people watching you play, and that's no reflection on Northants, it's just the reality of the situation. And that's actually when you have your dip. So 17, you keep your shit together. That wonderful 100 against Sussex when you're up against Archer and Robinson and Jordan and combative sort of stuff with them, which I remember at the time was like this idea that you had the steel to match it with guys trying to bomb you. But it's 2018 where there is this dip, and it's hard not to link what happened to you in Australia to the difficulties there, and that's the catalyst, I suppose, for you deciding to leave that club and move to Notts. If you give us a bit of insight to how that decision was made and the extent to which it had to do with how difficult you found 2018 after the peaks previously.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, mentally it might have done, but I actually, before that 2017 trip to Australia, I had an issue with my hand. When I came back from Australia, I had an operation, and then came back at the start of that summer, probably a month too early.
Right.
Which actually, at somewhere like Notts or something, they would have never allowed me to come back a month early. Because it was Northants, I remember we were playing Lord's first game of the year, I said, I'm playing. And I reckon if you saw any highlights of that summer, most of the photos, I've got my left hand off the bat, because it's like agony, and like I'd had an operation, come back too early. You know, then you find ways to score runs and you're holding the bat differently to how you ever used to. So for the next 4 or 5 years, I found it really difficult. Like I was batting different ways. I just completely forgot how that 20-year-old who got all those runs in 2016 held the bat. And even now,
it never occurred to you.
Even now, like I'm still more bottom-handed. Yeah. Whereas before, like I used to slash the ball like kind of over extra and stuff, and I know that you might change a little bit, but that hand thing affected me so much, which a lot of people, because at the time I was just a county cricketer and you don't really talk about those things, but that had a massive impact on me. But yeah, you're right, I got to a stage where it was like, okay, I'm however old I was, 24, 25, whatever I was, my career is not going anywhere. You know, and I love Northants, my home club, and it felt, you know, I met up with Pete Moores, and I remember leaving, and I just said, I've got to go there. Like, he was just a mate. I just sat with him for an hour, and I was like, I'm going there. And that was the best thing I ever did. You know, if I'd have stayed in Northants, who knows what would have happened. You know, I might be absolutely nowhere in my career, just playing there and not getting any better, but that's where I kind of went, right, I'm going there, I'm starting fresh. The hours I put in training, hitting balls, got to a stage where I kind of figured out my game again. And I probably took 3 or 4 years. In the meantime, I did fine, I did all right. And then it was probably actually around the COVID time where that was when England started looking at me again. I lost a lot of weight, I got fitter. And then kind of was in the same situation as I was before Australia. I was like in and around squads, doing well for my county, couldn't really get in. And then Baz took over as coach and obviously saw me playing and slogging away in Div 2 and thought, I'm going to pick that number 3 in Div 2 to open the batting for England.
It seems to be his way.
Yeah. I mean, it does stand out, doesn't it? Yeah, pandemic seasons. It's a weird time for a lot of cricketers who said they saw that as, I don't want to say good, that's being disrespectful to the pandemic and the effects of it, but there is the silver lining, if you like, was for a lot of you guys, you've been on the treadmill for many, many years and you got to just, at least for half a season, actually not do an awful lot, frustrating as it must have been. and you do well in that 2020 season. Similarly, in 2021, I've got a bit of a theory about 2021, about the early part of the season where runs were worth twice as much because it was behind closed doors. People plugged into those streams on the live streams on YouTube. You make a massive 100 against Worcestershire, and it felt like in the space of one lock, it's like, oh, that's right, that Ben Duckett guy, he fucking smashes it. Maybe we should. Do you sort of see that weird time in the pandemic as having vaulted you back into the conversation even before McCullum took over as coach?
Yeah, well, I remember there was a group of us who got brought back early, involved with England to train, and I was one of them, and I couldn't really get my head around why. Yeah, it just felt random, and it felt like, I don't know why I'm in and around this now. And then it was like from there, I was like, I don't want to lose this. Like I was going back to Notts, and I was training it just as hard, going and scoring runs, and because I remember I went back to that training thing, and then they had a series against Ireland where they got rid of 5 players, and I was one of those 5, and I was like, okay, I'm not in that then, but I was, at least I knew that I was kind of on the fringe. Yep. I was like, if you keep doing what you're doing now, there is a chance. But then I probably went back to playing championship cricket like that 21-year-old. I went for a period where I was like, well, I'm opening the batting, my numbers are good, but actually maybe the way that I play, you can't play Test cricket. So I was probably going through theories in my head. I went through times of trying to, bat deeper, bat slower. I got out, I played a leave and got bowled once, and I was like, what's going on here?
Never doing that again.
Never playing that shot ever again. And then it was actually when Baz took over.
Right.
I think maybe a few weeks before, I was facing this off spinner who just bowled me a straight one. I missed it and got bowled, and he was bowling to a 30-metre boundary. And then when Baz took over and I saw what the England lads were doing, I was like, why am I trying to be someone that I'm not? And then I started, and I know we're in Division 2 that year, and I think we're playing some great pitches, but I just went back to, see ball, hit ball. I got a double 100, I got some good hundreds, and I was scoring way quicker. And I reckon it was just perfect timing. And Baz, and maybe there wasn't a lot of that going around the country at the time. Probably at the pace that I was scoring, and I think Baz probably just saw that and said, we fancy him for Pakistan.
Right. The timing was great.
Yeah.
A double to finish the season is often a good thing to do. Runs in September.
Yeah.
Again, they seem to have extra weight when they're picking tours for overseas.
Getting your team promoted is
getting your team promoted as well.
You got knots up to do.
Because I remember, and this is what I find funny about sometimes people's cricket knowledge, because I was batting 3. And when I got picked, everyone was like, how can you pick a number 3 to open? I was thinking, first of all, it's not that different. You could be in the first over.
Yeah.
Secondly, 3/4 of my hundreds have been opening the batting.
Yeah.
But people just forget about this, and they think he bats like number 5 or something.
They look at literally the most recent scorecard that you've played, and that's it, because they've never actually watched a game of county cricket. Yeah, I think we've all run into these sort of people. Why are they playing cricket in September is what I've kept hearing this month. They've always played cricket in September.
Every day, people were saying that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pretty regular part of the program. But so from the technical standpoint, it was almost a running joke through the Ashes last year of Duckett doesn't leave, just plays at every ball, low leave percentage, all that sort of stuff. But you made it work. I've been fascinated by that. Watching Travis Head sometimes as well, I feel like it shouldn't work. The way he plays shouldn't work, but somehow he's good enough to make it work. And it's a bit like that with you. Conventional wisdom would say that what you're doing should be a road to failure in Test cricket, and yet you've been consistent. You've made scores consistently for pretty much that entire time. You hadn't really had bad runs in Test cricket for more than a couple of innings at a time. So how do you think you've been able to make that work?
Well, just because nothing's changed. So my whole career in county cricket. So that joke that's on the commentary box and talking worldwide, let's say, has always been the joke in whatever dressing room I've played. Right. People know that I don't leave. If I leave one or something for Notts, Clarkie will walk down and go, what was that? It's just always been the case that I want bat and ball, and that's a thing of you're going to nick off a lot. But I think the thing in Test cricket, the pitches generally are better. There's obviously more pace. Where do I want to score a lot of my runs? It's through backward point and third man. So I'm kind of saying to them, which the Aussies do a lot, and even Hazelwood in this series. I know it's 50 over cricket, but they're bowling to my strength, which is also my weakness.
Right.
So if you bowl it out there, which West Indies did a couple of times, I might be 30 or 15 in a test match because you've missed by this much and I've hit you for 4, but you then might you might nick me off at the same time. So
30 off 16.
And I think in county cricket, you don't face many bowlers bowling 90 mile an hour who wobble it across you. You face, as a left-hander, that first year, or that 2016 year, most bowlers bowled over the wicket. That was just how the game was back then. Since then, everyone, I'd love to know my percentage of over the wicket and round the wicket face. And I reckon it's like 90% round the wicket. So there, you bring in the stumps into play a lot. You tend to get used to bat and ball most of the time. Players are trying to not bowl it to me, which because I'm a bit nervous out there at the start. So if people are bowling straight to me, that's what I want. But, it probably brings in a lot more LBWs. But that's just how different the county game is to Test cricket. Because the bowlers bowl 78, 80 mile an hour, little wobblers on the knee roll, which I've found a way to get success to. And then actually it feels really weird now. A bowler's going back over the wicket and bowling into like a cut shot. But it's just something that I've always done. I haven't even gone, I want to leave less now or I want to leave more. It's just see ball, hit ball. If I do leave one, and to be honest, I don't think I have left one in Test cricket for about a year. It's just been a normal ball, but it's not something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
It's not even something that's like a joke really for me. It's just how I bat, and yeah.
Like what you said before about conventional wisdom, right? Like that, the risk-reward profile for a Test cricketer tends to be far more conservative than it is for you, and for your whole top six for the most part since the McCullum-Stokes leadership team came in. But you were all so at peace with it. I got to know the psychology of cricket. We spoke about that earlier about finding it difficult with low runs of scores and not knowing where your next run's going to come from. Feels like with your dressing room, it's like a mantra that's drilled into you every single day, every time you go to training or every time you're hitting a golf ball or whatever it is. You are a good player. It is going to be okay. And like that power of positive thinking means that you've been able to flip that conventional wisdom to have a far higher risk ratio, if you want to call it that, and not do so. You don't feel like it is. It feels like you don't interpret it as risky playing that way, even though by definition it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think you're completely right there. Like Stokesy and Baz will make you feel, or certainly more Baz, but will make you feel like you can do anything you want. And I think that's the biggest thing, which is probably, like, I get why fans get frustrated with us, because sometimes in the dressing room you probably are going, oh, does he need to do that? But when we're all kind of doing the same thing, and those moments can happen, like you can do some special things, which other teams have never ever done in the history of the game. And I think this summer we probably I know we were playing two teams that we should win, but there were certain periods where we were a lot smarter, and I think that we definitely are as a team, because also it's a team that's only played together for a couple of years, really. And realising moments, that's kind of what we talk about. Like, sometimes you're going to have to dig in. Sometimes, I think we've seen the best, in my eyes, best player in the world, Joe Root, back to him, just doing him. He doesn't need to go and play like maybe me, Zach, and people are playing, because he's one of the best who's ever played the game. And I think when he's doing his own thing and we're kind of batting around him, such a different team. But it's not all reckless. Like where I speak there, for example, scooping. I want the ball in any format. Playing a scoop shot is like top of the stumps, know exactly where it's going to be. So then, if you actually think about that shot, surely Test cricket's the easiest form to play that shot. Like
the highest percentage.
I know we're in the middle of a series now, but. And you've got to be careful what you say. Bowlers, it's probably coming out later, isn't it? But so Josh Hazelwood.
Safe.
So Hazelwood, he bowls late 80s, does not miss, and he's an incredible bowler. So I scooped him first over facing the other day to try and put him off that length. It's not like that's a stupid shot if you get out. there's normally a thought process behind it. So in the Sri Lanka series, I scooped him on a grid, is nipping around. He gets angry then and starts bowling bouncers. You then cut him for 6. Like, there is thought process behind it and stuff. Like Ruti does his reverse when bowlers are bowling 6 stump, you know, with everyone on that side. Okay, well, I know exactly where it's going to be. The only way I get out here is if I nick it to the keeper or something, which is quite, you know, which is very unlikely. You know, so there's all this going on, and it looks reckless when it doesn't come off, but there is generally a lot of thought process behind it. And I think that's probably where we're learning, because we're kind of trying to add things into Test cricket where it hasn't been done loads before. You know, I've got to be careful and not say never, because I know people did score quicker back in the day, and I got in trouble for that in India.
Yeah. Frank Worrell played a scoop shot in.
Yeah, like of course these things have happened.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, maybe not really on. I don't think many openers have been out caught on day one playing a scoop shot.
No.
You know, but there is kind of, you know, brains behind the madness in what we're trying to do, and we're also. You know, you've also got to remember when Stokesy and Baz took over, I think England had won like 2 test matches in a year or 2 years.
1 in 17, I think.
Or something like, you know what I mean? So,
couldn't go much worse.
But you know, and people still aren't happy if you win 5 out of 6 test matches this summer. I'm thinking it could be a lot worse. Like, we've won 2 series, we've won 5 out of 6 games. Like,
intrinsically, like, cricket fans love being unhappy. Like that's when they're happiest, when there's something to be unhappy about.
Yeah, but then also, like, even the way that things have gone. I remember going from the Ashes to the 100 last year, and the kids were screaming about Test cricket, and I was thinking, like, that's what we talk about as a team. Like, people have been speaking about for years. Test cricket's dying. Like, one of our main aims is to make sure that does not happen in this country. You know, kids are growing up and going, I want to play Test cricket. That looks so much fun. Like, not that looks so tough. That looks boring. That looks like, you know, which every team is different. But that's kind of, we want to make sure people are coming to the ground and enjoying it, and then hopefully we win as well.
So coming back into that 2022, it must have been such a contrast from, you know, debuting in 2016. You're in Bangladesh. You're batting with Alistair Cook. You were probably nervous as hell, and then come back in Pakistan in 22, make 100, first time back. And I mean, after all of those years of being out, wondering about whether you would get back to that level, and then having it work, having it click that first time in that, and it ends up being that ridiculous test match as well. It must have, I can't imagine how great the feeling would have been on that second time around.
Yeah, I mean, that was on the flattest wicket of all time as well, which is obviously nice to come back into. But I did manage to nick off a 0 in the second innings on it. But yeah, that was a weird one because, you know, I remember a few things about it, having about 2 hours sleep and throwing up all night the night before, which probably actually meant I wasn't nervous the next day, because I was more nervous about being sick or something like that. But most of the team were ill. And then to go and get 500 or whatever we did in that day was incredible. But I do remember what Baz said to me the day before or 2 days before or something. And he just said, don't worry about this game. Don't worry about the next game. Like, you're going to get a run at this. You know, so straight away there I'm going, right, well, I'm not batting this game to try and get picked for the next game or the next series. Like, he's effectively told me I'm going to New Zealand after this series. And then you go out there and just play. You're like, I'm not nervous. I can just play my game and hopefully it'll work. And I just remember that because it was so different to the time before, you know, where I played 4 tests in some of the hardest conditions I've ever played, or the hardest probably I'd say I've ever played in. And that wasn't the case. That felt like every single time you were batting to keep your spot. You know, so that was a big thing from Baz, and just going, look, you're going to get a run. And then straight away the pressure's off. Go and do what you do.
And it sort of morphed beautifully into the bucket hat summer of 2023, where you're a bit of a poster child for all of that, weren't you, with the bucket hats? And I think you get to your 1,000th test run at a better strike rate than anyone. These sort of stats start doing the rounds. I know the leave percentage was part of the fixation, but 2 scores at Lords that could have been match winning didn't end up playing out that way, with a 90 and an 80, with 98 out, and you become the symbol of all things that are reckless about the new approach. I mean, it does strike me that at the moment, that from a public perception perspective, that you guys are either being lauded as you say, saving Test cricket. And I know sometimes the comments from within the group go to that and they can be criticised too, and that's fair enough. Through to being, oh gosh, these guys are a bunch of dickheads. Like, you really do have to ride the wave far more than teams that perhaps play a more traditional conservative brand of Test cricket. And you have to kind of, I guess, come to terms with that, knowing that it's going to be extreme ends of the spectrum about how you're interpreted. Yeah,
exactly. And I also think people, for that Test match, we nearly chased 360 against Australia on day 5 of a Test match, which would have been a ridiculous chase from 20 for 4, maybe, whatever we were. So there's also, it wasn't like we got bowled out for 120. I know Stokes has played one of the best innings ever, but I do believe if I bat with him for another hour until lunch on that first morning, on that day 5 morning, we win the game.
Yep.
Then Johnny walks out his crease and gets run out. Those little moments, if you add 30 runs from Johnny there, we probably win the game. There's so many different things. And I also remember, I don't know, it might have happened before, but when you've got 4 blokes who are all 6'5" plus bowling bouncers at you, you can't, on a pitch that's going up and down a bit, you can't just get out the way and that's not a shot I play. I don't leave the ball, I don't get under it. I'm sure that's a strength of mine. And I remember saying in a press conference, if that was a raging green seamer and I got 98 and 83, you wouldn't be having a go at me for getting out playing 2 drives. So you have to find a way to deal with it. And I think, scoring 180 runs in the game against that attack when they're bowling bouncers consistently, that was probably one of my best games in an England shirt. I know I got out to it twice, but they've made it very clear that was all they were going to do to me. Because when they pitched it up, it wasn't doing a lot and I was scoring quite freely. So they were just going to bowl bumpers, and obviously Gaz got injured, so they weren't going to bowl spin. So you have to find a way then, right, how am I going to deal with this? And I actually changed first to second innings. First innings, I was trying to hit it and got caught fine leg. Majority of the second innings, I was just trying to knock it on the head, get down the other end and do that for 6 hours, which is good fun.
Yeah, I mean...
And not try and get hit by some of the fastest bowlers in the world at the same time. It's not overly enjoyable.
No, like you say, you have to be able to score from it. You can't just sit there and not score all day.
Because if I wasn't scoring and they're taking wickets at the other end, well, that's exactly what they want to do.
Right.
Keep you from scoring and we'll take wickets.
It's an ugly part of the modern game, but it's so bloody effective, right? You guys did it in that Test as well. It works.
So fun. It's so fun when you're in the field, but when you bang, it's not overly. That's my thing about the Ashes away. If I do go, I get to 40, right? Bumpers, and cool.
Yeah.
But then you add things in you go. So let's say you go to the MCG with short, straight boundaries, right? I'll just scoop it. It's going to go miles, isn't it? When they're bowling that quick. But you have to find ways to overcome that, whatever that may be.
You described your 100 in Rajkot, jumping forward to the India winter, as your best innings for your country, and I mean the way that you were able to put the pressure on. And I guess that relationship with Zach as well, right? You've been described as I think that the quote is you're a club team that happen to play for England. You're also such fucking good mates and playing golf together every day and all the rest of it. And obviously you and Zach are a big part of that, opening the batting together. But taking that on the road to India, I know you enjoyed success in Pakistan the previous year and had done well in New Zealand as well, but different gravy trying to do it against India, against some of the best spinners to ever play the game, and you're able to conquer that in the first innings with such an impressive performance, but ultimately in a performance where you guys don't get the win. That must have been desperately frustrating. How many times you got into a position in that series where you could have won, only for some of the pieces missing. I don't know whether it's above the shoulders as a team in development mode, trying to be the best you can be, that seizing those moments are ultimately what sets the very best teams ever apart from where you are at the moment, where you want to be.
Yeah, I think so. And, there's so many moments and stuff to look back on that series. I think, first of all, to be in a situation where we could have won a series, and I know that's a big shout because we lost 4-1. Yeah. But it did feel like there were moments where we could. We had our two spin bowlers really were, Tommy Hartley, who really is a white ball spinner, who's played a bit for Lancs, and then Bash, who's hardly played at all. If you think about that, when England have won in India with Graham Swan and Monty Panesar, it's slightly different. So to even get yourself in a position where, these guys are spinning through India in England in India is pretty remarkable in itself. And then I think just as certain individuals as batters, we all did good things. We just probably weren't consistent enough. Popey's 1 score, I got a score. Creeps actually, Zach got 5 or 6 50s maybe. If he then converts 2 of those to 140s, 150s. But we are talking about playing against Ashwin, Bumrah, these guys in India, which is extremely difficult. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, to go and show that I could, play a knock like that against that attack, and certainly Ashwin, because, he certainly, had my name when I in 2016, but I'm pretty sure he's had Warner's every time he's gone there, and any left-hander.
Oh, well, he's got 522.
Yeah,
and he's got a fair few guys.
It's pretty good. I made jokes at the end of that series saying Tommy Hartley's the only left-hander who can deal with Ashwin, because every time he faced him, he just ran and hit him for 6. So I just said, "How are you doing that?" So yeah, I mean, my only frustration on that was I was probably in a situation after the 3rd test to have a good series in India. Could average 50 plus, and it's a tough place to go. And when you've kind of lost a series, and you then might try some different things. In the last game, I thought I'm going to try and hit Ashwood straight, which didn't work. And then you have a bad couple of games, and it doesn't finish the way you want. But I was in a position where I could have, come home and I've scored a fair amount of runs and done well. But yeah, it's an incredibly tough tour, and it's a tough place to go. And there's a reason why they do so well there.
It's big year ahead. Fitness selection pending, of course, all the caveats. But you've got this tour of Pakistan coming, New Zealand away. You've got India for 5 in England next summer, and then off to Australia again to start up that old story. Is it exciting? Is it daunting? Is it a bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, right now it feels, you're even just chatting to some lads who are saying they're exhausted, and they've got October and November off, and you're thinking it doesn't really stop at the minute, which is not a bad thing. As I say, I feel like I'm in good form and I'm getting so many opportunities to go and play. And but yeah, I mean, the schedule right now is pretty hectic. Yeah, I mean, there's so much cricket. I've added the Big Bash into that, so I can't really complain. I'm playing too much cricket. It just felt like a good opportunity from go to New Zealand with my missus and little one, and take them to Australia. Opportunities that you don't always get. So
and it's not every season that you will be fit and available and all.
Exactly, and also it's a long way to go, Australia, and we're already in New Zealand. It just felt perfect to go and enjoy that and play some cricket out there. And also, I do remember playing the Big Bash last time. You can get used to conditions a little bit. I know it's a year out from the Ashes, but just reminding myself what it is like to bat in Australia. Even if you go and get 70 off 40 at the Gabba, you go back there the year after and you're thinking, I've got good memories here, and those things go a long way. But yeah, we got India, as you say, and the goal for me is to be there for Australia. To witness, to be a part of an Ashes in England and in Australia would be something. 3 years ago, I'd have been like, there's just no chance that could ever happen. So. Yeah, I've heard some good and bad things about those Ashes tours and how tough it can be, and the crowds and stuff. But it'll be amazing, and hopefully we'll have a pretty secure team that's been together for a few years, and hopefully some bowlers that bowling 90 plus mile an hour, so I can give them a taste of their own medicine.
Well, as you say, you're nearly about to turn 30, so it feels like there's been a nice mid-career check-in rather with you, and it's been great to hear how you've been able to take your opportunities and really make the most of them in recent years. We look forward to following your career and your journey in the game, and best of luck with the huge 12 months ahead.
Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.